Welcome to Speaking Concretely, the official podcast of the Cement Association of Canada. I'm your host, Adam Auer, President and CEO of the CAC. The Cement Association of Canada works with many industry partners across Canada, and on this podcast, we aim to provide our listeners with some insight into the breadth of representation and collaboration across the sector. To help us paint this picture, I'm thrilled to be speaking today with Bart Kanters. Bart is President of Concrete Ontario, Chair of the Canadian Ready Mix Concrete Association, Chair of the Concrete Council of Canada, and a recognized leader with over 30 years' experience in the Canadian concrete sector. Welcome, Bart, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for having me.
Why don't we start with you telling our audience a little bit more about yourself and your over 30-year career in the concrete industry. How did you get into concrete, as they say?
Yeah, I think it's like many people in the concrete industry, a passion for construction. So civil engineering grad from the University of Waterloo, spent 6 years with a concrete restoration and environmental contracting firm. And then from there, I've now spent 25 years with the Ready Mix Concrete Association of Ontario, or Concrete Ontario as we have short formed it. But again, it's a lot of interest in construction. So I personally had a farming background growing up on a tobacco farm in Delhi, Ontario. So a lot of working with your hands, a lot of building things. And that's one of the great things about the concrete industry is that concrete's such a critical raw material to all construction projects that you get involved with every type of project that's out there. So again, the passion, I started off as a junior engineer working for the association, and then over the past 25 years, transitioned up to division manager and then vice president and now president of the association. But again, the association is representing the ready mix producers here in the province of Ontario. And concrete, we've produced about 11 million cubic meters of concrete last year. And again, demand keeps increasing. We've got a few challenges with some of the housing challenges that are going on right now in the industry, but concrete's an essential construction material, and it's just great to be involved in so many different interesting projects.
Well, you've been president of Concrete Ontario for about 7 years now, if I did my math correctly. Tell us a little bit about Concrete Ontario. What does it do? What are your main objectives?
Yeah, so we've got three main pillars that the association looks after. So we're responsible for, first pillar relates to training and education. So again, we have 273 certified concrete plants in the province. We've got 3,800 certified concrete trucks in the province. So about a third of what the association does relates to training and education for our members. So we do a lot of ACI certification courses on concrete testing, self-consolidating concrete, fundamentals of flat work construction, those types of things that we do internally. We have a fundamentals of concrete course that's 2 days that we run for new entries into the industry for our membership. And again, trying to address some of the training and education needs. On the contractor and consultant side, then again, it's providing a little more detailed knowledge about the concrete industry to architects, engineers, contractors as it relates to the product itself. The unique thing about ready mix concrete is we're supplying a plastic unfinished product out to the job site. So we've got the added challenges of dealing with changing weather conditions, changing temperature, moisture conditions. The contractor is physically placing the concrete out on the job site. So that creates a whole bunch of new challenges for them on how to deal with it. So the education component is fairly large. Second component that we get into is codes and standards. And that's where we interact a lot with Cement Association of Canada and our other concrete industry allies as it relates to the cement standards, the concrete standards, the concrete testing standards. So about a third of our time is spent. I believe there's 7 different CSA standards that we currently sit on and provide technical input to that relate to concrete construction across the entire country. And then the third component that we get into is general product knowledge and marketing. So again, trying to highlight the fact that concrete is the most used construction material in the world. It's critical for sustainability. It's critical for resiliency and durability, and there's a lot of things that it has to offer. So trying to highlight in a very competitive construction marketplace, what are the real benefits of using concrete?
It's worth repeating that last stat, as we have before on this podcast, about concrete being the most consumed material on the planet after water, and that it is the engine of construction, and also a feedstock for virtually every economic sector in Canada and worldwide. Manufacturing, energy, public utilities, housing, schools, hospitals, etc. And I think, while the cement manufacturing is a global business, um, the story of concrete is really one that plays out at the local level. And you mentioned a bit about your members. You've got members in, I think, 350 locations across the province. How would you describe the role that concrete plays in local communities at that very local level? What makes it so important from a local perspective?
So regardless of what the overall construction method is that you're using, again, we say concrete's a foundational material because we literally start using it right from the foundation up. So because of that, um, again, it's ready mix concrete. It's a plastic product. We're basically delivering the product from mixing sandstone, cement, and admixtures at the concrete plant. We're typically driving 40 to 50 minutes away from the plant to deliver the material while it's still in that plastic stage so that the contractor can work with it and place it. So we're using local cement, local sand, local stone, local labor, and we're delivering to our local communities. That's why there's so many concrete plants all across the province, because whether I'm building a single story home or a 50-story downtown Toronto condo, um, we need the material to be delivered locally because we've basically got that 2-hour window from the time that we first mix the sand, stone, cement, and admixtures together to get it delivered out to the job site and let the contractor evaluate it, test it, place it, and start the finishing process. Now we can extend that a little bit with chemical admixtures, but that's really why it's so local. And that's what we try and highlight to everyone that we talk to. Again, when it comes to these challenging times that we're in, there's nothing more local than ready mix concrete. Literally, we're on average hauling sand and stone no more than 30 to 40 kilometers to the concrete plant. Cement is under 200 kilometers, typical average travel distance. Admixtures, same thing. So again, they're all local materials for our local communities.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a super important story to keep telling, especially in the context of the tariff uncertainty that we face south of the border and the desire in Canada to support local and to buy Canadian. Concrete fits very perfectly into that narrative as we contemplate these big national infrastructure projects. You mentioned sustainability, which is another topic that we've raised a number of times on this podcast. And so I thought I'd ask you a little bit about your other two roles that I mentioned in the introduction. You're president of a provincial ready mix association, but you're also chair of two national associations, the Canadian Ready Mix Concrete Association, or Concrete Canada, as it's now known as well as the Concrete Council of Canada. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about these associations and their purpose. And I think what I'm trying to highlight here is the investment that the industry is making in collaboration and why that's so important. What are the issues that are really driving that collaboration at the national level?
Yeah, the challenges that we face, again, the various concrete is a local material, especially in the ready mix industry. So we have 7 provincial ready mix concrete associations that are members of the Canadian Ready Mix Concrete Association. So we all have slightly different rules and regulations because each province has its own unique requirements, whether it's transportation, environment, construction practices, etc. But we all face the same challenges. So really what we've been trying to do through the Canadian Ready Mix Association is set up meetings to learn from one another and to share information. So again, when it comes to new best practices that BC develops, they can easily be adopted for use in Ontario or Quebec or any other province. So one of the great things that I've seen over the 25 years that I've been working with the association is the willingness of the individual association members to give back to one another. Again, literally, we are local. We operate at the local level. We don't compete against Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba. So it creates great opportunities for us to coordinate and to share information and to work together on combined projects so that we can try and punch above our weight when it comes to trying to find funding to do individual projects. So again, what any we could do 6 or 7 times as much work when we all start pulling together. So that's really one of the great things that I've seen through the CRMCA. Now that's at the ready mix level. So then when we jump over to the Concrete Council of Canada, now we're taking it to our core, basically partnerships of all the different concrete product associations. So you've got cement, you've got ready mix, you've got precast, you've got masonry, you've got pipe, you've got interlocking paver. Again, go down the list of all the different concrete products that are out there. We're all basically selling the same type of resiliency, durability, and function to the marketplace. So again, marketing is one of the bigger challenges that all of us face. We all have shared properties. So whether it's precast or ready mix or masonry that we're using in a building, again, we're all offering fire resistance. We're all offering sound reduction. We're all offering sustainability options to the marketplace. So rather than trying to compete against one another, we're really trying to coordinate our efforts together and try and be heard. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have at the CCC group is making the rest of the country realize how much concrete is out there, that it is one of our local products and it serves a lot of great functions, and trying to highlight its use in a competitive marketplace.
I think one of the significant milestones that I see, the Cement Association, I should say, is a member of the Concrete Council of Canada's one of the actors in the cement and concrete value chain. Over the past number of years, we've all been focusing very much on sustainability and the challenge of decarbonization. You mentioned some of the inherent properties of concrete, but we also developed collectively a roadmap or an action plan on decarbonization called Concrete Zero, and the Concrete Council of Canada, as well as the individual and collective ready mix associations and other concrete product associations, were instrumental to that process. Maybe you could describe a little bit, from your perspective, how the industry came together to deliver what really is quite, I think, a remarkable achievement, a remarkable consensus across the industry on what will be, undoubtedly a very challenging objective of reaching net zero by 2050.
Yeah, no, it's a great opportunity. Again, one of the key things that we've heard from owners and contractors and specifiers is the need to proactively quantify what our carbon intensity is and look to methods to try and reduce that intensity. So again, sustainability is a key function. We're very fortunate in the concrete industry in the standpoint that we've been utilizing performance specifications for many decades now when it comes to trying to quantify what are the benefits of the product. And quite frankly, sustainability is one of those issues where through the use of environmental product declarations or quantifying the intensity of carbon, it lends itself very well to a performance model where we can first step back and say, okay, what's our current baselines when it comes to where is the industry in general? And again, if you want early strength, if you're looking for low permeability, if you're looking for low shrinkage, those are the kind of performance options that we've been supplying for decades. In the last 10 years, we've seen a significant increase in, well, what's your carbon intensity and what can you do to try and reduce that carbon intensity? So by working together with the Cement Association and the other concrete allies, I think we've made some huge steps forward in trying to quantify in hard numbers where we're at. And I think we can look to the fact that we've got so many industry average EPDs for all the different concrete products out there to show that we're not just pulling numbers out of the air. We're looking at where is the industry right now and trying to implement metrics to start measuring our advancement moving forward. So the net zero roadmap really spells out to us what are the key levers that we have to drive improvement and change, and how can we move along that roadmap while still providing the performance, durability, and resiliency that everyone has expected from concrete for the last 200 years.
You mentioned environmental product declarations. I want to tease that apart a little bit because I think it is such a great example of leadership across the industry in the sustainability space, but in particular, just in terms of our commitment to transparency. And one of the things that came out of the roadmap, as you know, is that at the end of the day, if the industry is producing solutions, the market has to want those solutions or be willing to accept those solutions. And importantly, it needs to be able to understand with clarity and confidence what the real benefits are of those solutions, including on the decarbonization side. And so environmental product declarations are one of the tools that we use to disclose that information to the market. Maybe you could describe for the audience a little bit, what are EPDs? What was the major advance that we made as an industry over the past a couple of years in terms of disclosures through environmental product declarations, and how do you see them supporting ultimately the uptake of low carbon and climate resilient solutions in the broader marketplace?
Yeah, we're very fortunate in Canada to have performance-based specifications, and that's what we've been using for decades now when it comes to trying to quantify what does the owner or the contractor want to see from the concrete. So that's one of the key things that we can build upon. When we look at carbon intensity, the first industry average EPD that we did in the ready mix industry was back in 2017. So that's the first time we looked at a national level of how can we quantify where we're at as an industry, because until you start measuring it, you can't improve it. So we've got to set up a system to measure it. So what we like about environmental product declarations is the fact that you've got product category rules that whether I'm in Ontario, BC, Atlanta, Georgia, in the States, it doesn't matter where I am in North America, we're all using the same tools and methods to come up with what is the carbon intensity for ready-mix concrete in my example. And so in 2017, we did our first industry average EPD to say, okay, here's where we are as an industry. Once we did that first one and we started working with contractors and owners and government on how can we pull the levers to improve our sustainability performance, then we realized, okay, wait, that it's great to do it at a national level, but we're a local material. There's different cements available in different marketplaces. The supplementary cementing materials that are available to our members here in Ontario are completely different than the ones that are available to members in Atlantic Canada or Saskatchewan or Alberta. So in 2022, we then took the 7 regions, the 7 associations that make up the Canadian Ready Mix Association, and we said, okay, every ready mix region is going to have its own individual industry average EPD for their province. So that then allowed Ontario, Alberta, BC, go down the list of all the provincial associations to quantify what are the big concretes that we use in Ontario. So again, there's regional differences. We do a lot of high-rise construction in Ontario, and there's a lot of high-strength 50, 70, 90 MPa concrete in Ontario that doesn't exist in, for example, maybe the Manitoba or the Saskatchewan market. So what it gave each province the ability to do then was to say, look at your market, what are the most commonly used concrete components, and let's start analyzing the high volume concrete applications so that we can start quantifying where we're at and make improvements. So that was 2022, and we're just on the cusp in the next few months of issuing issuing an RFP for our third industry average EPD, where we can move forward with some of the advancements and start quantifying where we're at. So the things we love about EPDs, again, it's repeatable, it's quantifiable. We're happy to disclose what the carbon intensity of each individual mix design is, but it still protects the intellectual property of the concrete producer by not having to uh, disclose mixed proportions, but people want to know what the carbon intensity is. They want to set limits around that. It gives us the ability to add to specifications performance requirements around sustainability that make complete sense to the concrete industry and hopefully the owners and contractors as well.
What's your sense of how those EPDs are being put into practice? I mean, we do have now a federal standard for low carbon concrete that uses the regional average EPDs to make decisions about low carbon construction for federally owned projects, and so that's happening across the country. But where do you see what are you seeing in terms of how these EPDs are supporting decision making more broadly in the marketplace? Or is it only at the public infrastructure level, or are we starting to see more private sector interest?
We're starting to see more private sector interest. Again, that's one of the challenges. It's the chicken or egg type of issue. The concrete industry has bought in, like literally, we're going back 10 years now on environmental product declarations. So very happy to see the work that the Federal Treasury Board has put out in regards to trying to quantify at the overall project level what's the carbon intensity of the concrete that you're planning to use, and then setting up a requirement to measure the actual carbon intensity of the concrete we supply to the job. So I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, if we went back 3 years ago, there was maybe 3 of our 80 members that had EPDs. At this point right now, we've got over 18 or 20 members that have mix specific EPDs. We're seeing it both small 1 or 2 plant ready mix operations as well as some of our larger 20 or 30 plant concrete producers that have environmental product declarations. So it's really starting to pick up at this time. The challenge we're getting into is how do we properly implement it into specifications and make it a true performance requirement. But there's been a huge amount of advancement in the last 2 years.
Unpack that last point for me a little bit. The challenges of integrating those into specifications. What does that mean in terms of just put it in sort of real world decision making terms?
Yeah. So again, I'll pick. There's EPDs for precast and masonry and other products. I'll focus on ready mix since that's the area that I work in every day. But one of our challenges is the fact that because we're supplying a plastic flowing concrete in a ready mix truck out to a job site, we have to deal with weather conditions, site conditions, and contractor form removal requirements. So again, there's a whole bunch of different factors we'll have at the design phase. The owner and the architect and engineer are looking at what's the total carbon intensity for the project, what's typically used on this. I'll pick a hospital project, for example. What's typically used on a hospital project, and can we get a 10 or 15% carbon reduction on the project? So the challenge for us on the ready mix level is we've got lots of different levers that we can pull to reduce the carbon intensity, but we still have to provide initial strength. We still have to provide final strength. We still have to account for the construction schedule and how quickly the contractor wants to remove the formwork and reinstall the shoring on a hospital project where we're going up 10 or 15 stories with a concrete framing system. So the challenge then becomes a lot of people want to just take the simple approach and just say, every mix that you produce, I want to see a 10% carbon reduction. Well, that creates a whole bunch of challenges out on the job site. So there's some applications like if I'm doing a 2,000 cubic meter raft slab for a condo building, I can use very high supplementary cementing materials and really lower the carbon intensity of that mix because it's a 2 meter thick raft slab. That strength will not be required for months and months and months. So again, what the great thing that we like about the Federal Treasury Board project approach is to give the project the maximum flexibility. Right at the start of the job, let's look at what are the applications where, for example, there's not always, but there's often a trade between early strength and low carbon. If I want early strength, it tends to be slightly higher carbon depending on the products that we're using. So let's go through the project. Let's identify where are the high early strength requirements. Those ones we're going to have maybe a little less than designed carbon reduction on, but the elements where early strength is not required, we can implement a lot of carbon reduction there. So again, that's what we like about the Treasury Board approach is let's total up the entire carbon on the entire project, the elements where it makes complete sense to both the contractor schedule, the structural design, and the concrete producer's mix design. Let's optimize those well beyond the carbon reduction that they're looking for. And then that gives us the leeway for some of the more time-sensitive elements to not go quite as aggressive, but still reach the overall project goals of 10 or 15% carbon reduction on the whole job.
So there's a lot of change happening in the market, although we've often discussed on this podcast and broadly in other industry discussions that the construction industry as a whole is sometimes slow to change, just because change, implies risk. Sometimes it implies costs, or at least perceived costs. That's often a fear. But what you're describing to me is an industry in many ways in a kind of evolution. And so maybe I'll ask as sort of a final question, where do you see the industry going over the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe to put it simply, what is the future of concrete in your view?
Yeah, I think it's lower carbon concrete is definitely the future that we see. We've seen huge advancements from the cement industry in both GUL cement and supplementary cementing materials. In the ready-mix industry, we've been using supplementary cementing materials for high strength and low permeability for decades, and we've got tons of history there. We've been working closely with members of the Cement Association of Canada on partnerships to show how these new generation cements can be used cost effectively and efficiently in new applications. And I think that's where we're working with the admixture industries on new and innovative admixtures. Again, one of the great flexibilities of ready-mix concrete is that we're using 3 or 4 critical raw materials to create a product that meets both plastic and hardened performance requirements. So we've got the cement industry providing significant contributions. We've got the admixture industry providing significant contributions. We've even got the aggregate industry providing premium products and better gradation on products to help us address the issue. And then we've got the concrete producer that's implementing their own knowledge of the local materials that they're using to come up with mixed designs that still meet strength, permeability, low shrinkage reduction, and low carbon intensity. So lots of great opportunities moving forward.
Bart, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our audience for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and follow our podcast on your favorite platform. We hope to see you next time.